you're locked into another episode of the Anilujah podcast. My name is Josh, and I'm glad to be back with you once again this week, making that intersection between faith and animation and delivering those redemptive analogies you have come to know and love. And I've gotta be honest with y'all, kind of tired right now. Reason being I've been juggling a lot of different household chores and been doing podcast editing for other projects, which has made my sleep schedule kind of unpredictable, generally leading me to not go to bed until the wee hours of the morning. But hey, it's all in the name of bringing you thoughtful content, right? But just to give you a bit of an update of what has happened since the last time, I've been getting things ready for this episode and future episodes since becoming a solo podcaster / content creator, since Rebecca's exit as the co-host of Anilujah. This has included switching up some gear, downsizing the tech a bit to better fit my workflow. And this is also meant to move into a bi-weekly upload schedule. Historically, Anilujah has always been a weekly podcast, but to ensure some really good quality content and my sanity, it is now moving to a twice-a-month podcast starting this week. I also want to thank everyone who's reached out for your words of encouragement and prayers during this transition of the podcast. I cannot say this enough. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Today, though, I'm going to talk about a subject that I don't believe has been discussed on the podcast previously. If you're a fan of anime, you more than likely have come across some obscure titles such as Campfire Cooking in Another World or Reborn as a Vending Machine, I Now Wander the Dungeon. These shows are mostly comedic, but there are many that have a lot of depth to them. These shows also fall into a particular genre, a genre where the anime titles are, at times, absurdly long. The genre of anime I want to talk about today is Isekai. But what is Isekai? The term Isekai literally means different or other world. In anime, it usually involves a character dying, falling asleep, or getting sucked into a portal, or being summoned, only to wake up in a fantasy land. Think RPG rules, kingdoms at war, magical abilities. You'll get the idea. But here's the deeper appeal. Isekai stories are often transformational through suffering, a new sense of purpose, and characters discovering who they really are when everything else is stripped away. And that's where it starts to sound very familiar, spiritually familiar. This reminds me of Philippians 2, 6-8, where Paul writes that Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but made himself nothing, being made in human likeness. That's the ultimate Isekai move. God stepping from eternity into our broken world, not to be crowned a hero, but to suffer and redeem. Suffering and redemption are the biggest part of most Isekai and Isekai-related animes. Transformation is also another big player when it comes to character growth. I want to explore some of these themes through 3 different shows from the world of Isekai and break down some of the biblical or spiritual connections. First, let's talk about Re:Zero. If you're unfamiliar with this series, it centers around our main protagonist, Subaru Natsuki. a completely average guy who suddenly finds himself in a fantasy world. No warning, no explanation, just dropped in the middle of a magical land. But what really sets ReZero apart is Subaru's unique curse, or gift, I guess. Depending on how you look at it, every time he dies, he returns to a specific moment in the past, retaining all of his memories, which is their perk, but having to relive and repair the damage from whence he came. The catch is, he can't tell anybody about this ability, and the mental and emotional toll of repeated deaths starts to break him down. This relentless cycle of death and rebirth forces Subaru to confront his own weaknesses, fears, and the consequences of his actions. Each revival becomes a crucible, refining his character and compelling him to grow in courage, wisdom, and empathy. This narrative arc mirrors the Christian concept of sanctification, the transformative process of becoming more Christ-like through trials and tribulations. In James 1, 2-4, we're encouraged to consider it pure joy whenever we face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Subaru's journey embodies this scripture, showing us that character isn't forged in comfort, it's shaped in the fire. And it doesn't stop there. As Subaru matures, he begins to shift from being reactive and self-centered to being sacrificial and deeply focused on others. Initially, a lot of his actions are driven by desire and for validation and affection, especially from Anilujah, but who can blame them? But over time, his willingness to suffer and even die repeatedly becomes an act of love. John 15:13 comes to mind. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Subaru becomes a walking example of that kind of love, even when it costs him everything. Now, let's flip the script a bit here. From the guy stuck in a resurrection loop to the literal demon lord, learning how to budget? Yes, I'm talking about the devil is a part-timer. Satan, the demon king himself, is defeated in his own world and ends up stranded in modern-day Tokyo without any of his powers. To survive, he takes on a human form, adopts the name Sato Mao, and starts working part-time at the fast food joint called McDonald's, or WickDonald's, depending on what they want. I think it's McDonald's or WickDonald's. Anyway, but what makes this show so interesting is that Mao gradually changes, not because he's forced to, but because everyday life starts to soften him. The more he works with humans, the more he starts showing empathy, care, and even a bit of integrity. He begins to protect people, even those who might be considered his enemies. He builds community, helps out coworkers, and genuinely starts living with purpose, even in the most ordinary of settings. This transformation screams Philippians 2-4. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. What we see in Mao is someone who, despite having been a tyrant in another world, is now choosing humility. He's not trying to conquer Tokyo. He's just trying to be a decent guy. And that's powerful. It's a reminder that no one is beyond change. Even the worst reputations can be rewritten. For those of you who are saying, oh, well, you're paying the devil to be a nice guy and he can change. This is very loosely based on Satan for the show. Again, we all know the truth, those of us who are in the Christian faith, about Satan. Like, he has his own agenda. He's very cunning in what a way. But this is a what if situation. So don't come at me for this. This is a what if Satan were in our world or in modern day Tokyo? What if his heart was able to be changed? Again, this is the world of fiction. His dynamic with Emilia, one of the angels, going by Anilujah when in modern day Tokyo, is another great touch point. They were enemies, sure, but now they're forced to coexist, and their interactions slowly evolve from hostility to mutual respect. Watching them try to reconcile the past with the present is like watching the early stages of forgiveness and grace unfold. Jesus said in Matthew 5:44, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." It's not clean or easy in this story, but you can see the cracks forming in the walls we've built. And that's where healing really starts. Now, I'll be the first to say that I've enjoyed the past 2 seasons of the Devil's a Part-Timer. Found it very funny, and also it kind of makes you think in some ways. Again, this is not meant to be your Sunday school lesson or to get a picture of who Satan really is. But it does raise, I think, some theological questions and the whole what-if universe. Lastly, the rising of the shield hero. This one hits especially hard if you've ever been unfairly judged, falsely accused, or pushed to the margins. Naofumi Iwatani is summoned to a parallel world as one of the 4 legendary heroes, or 4 cardinal heroes, each given a specific weapon. While the others get cool offensive gear like swords and spears, Naofumi is stuck with a shield, which means he can't attack, only defend. To make things worse, he's framed for a crime he didn't commit almost immediately after arriving, and the entire kingdom turns against him. The betrayal is deep, and Naofumi spirals into cynicism and bitterness. But what is amazing is how he slowly climbs out of that pit. Not through rage and revenge, but by choosing to protect the vulnerable. He meets Raptalia, a traumatized slave girl, but instead of using her, he treats her with dignity. Over time, the two build something real: trust, family, and hope in the middle of all the pain Naofumi has had to endure. Later on in the series, we have the unforgettable scene where the truth of what Princess Malti and old King Cray Melremark have been doing, their misdeeds and trickery, are put on display for the entire kingdom to witness. The queen then sentenced them to execution, and Naofumi, who had every right to want this revenge, actually stops it and grants his persecutors the ultimate mercy. Instead of death, Naofumi recommends that they be publicly humiliated like this.
So I've got a better idea. From now on, the king's name is Trash, and the first princess will be called...
Trash?
My name's not...
It is now, and it will be for the rest of your life. If you don't like it, you can go ahead and die now.
Now, yes, it's savage, but it's also merciful considering the alternative. He could have ended them, but he didn't. Romans 12:19 comes to mind for this. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. That moment proves that Naofumi has grown. He's not just a bitter victim anymore. He's a protector who can show grace, even to the ones who broke him. The Isekai genre really goes deep. Sure, it's about wild new worlds and big battles, but at its heart, it's about transformation. Whether it's Subaru learning to love sacrificially, Sato Mao discovering humility and protecting others, or Naofumi rising from betrayal into redemption. These stories are packed with spiritual parallels, and maybe that's what makes Isekai so relatable in a sense. We all know what it feels like to be thrown into a world we didn't ask for, to feel unqualified, to suffer, but also to grow, to be changed, to find our calling in the middle of the chaos. And that's going to do it for this episode. If you're related to any of these isekai shows that I talked about, or if there's another isekai that you think I might enjoy, go ahead and leave it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and ring the bell for notifications so that you are notified every time I upload a new video. And until next time, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends.